Can you believe in a story that is not factually or historically true? And why should you? I recently ran a marathon. I can tell you for a fact that our brains can definitely believe in stories that are not factually or historically true, because I had a voice in my head telling me to stop running a lot, and it was coming off with loads of stories. But more personal to you perhaps is if you have any sort of, I don't mean on a clinical setting, but some bit of paranoia, someone's talking about you, you're imagining, you're trying to use empathy, perspective shifting to understand what other people are seeing you as, how you're showing up in the world, all of this stuff. A lot of that is imaginal. It's how we navigate the world, but a lot of it's going to be wrong. If you're anxious about the future, only one of those futures can happen. So just mathematically, most of those are going to be wrong. If you've dealt with depression, self-doubt, those kind of stories that we tell ourselves about not being good enough, self-worth, all that sort of stuff. And if you've transcended them, you're hopefully able to look back and say, like, they were not factually or historically true. And yet I believed them, because our brains can do that. Okay, so all of those examples were negative. So why am I saying we should believe in a story that is not factually or historically true? Surely that's the project that we've been on for the last 300 years, where we've said, no, we don't want the fantasies, the imaginings. We want to navigate and use science to find the best way, the true way, the scientific way to the future, what's best, in an objective sort of sense. But what we mean by truth is a difficult topic. I'll give you, this is kind of an example that gets thrown around quite a bit. There are two tribes, it's a story. So there's two tribes. One is very mystical, is very storytelling, has these stories about the porcupines, those hedgehogs with the really long quills. And the stories they tell say that the porcupines can throw their quills like a Superman, like little darts, and they fire it at you from like 10 meters away. So you better be careful, kids. Because of this, no one ever dies from porcupines. They give those creatures a wide berth. They do not go near them because of these stories, because of these characters. And yes, the tricks that they play might not even be just the quills. They might be these, like, secrets and this kind of these fairies or ghouls, or again, we're getting into mystical talk here. But no one dies. The other tribe is far more rational and knows for a fact that the porcupines can't throw their quills, and looks at the first tribe and says, you're fools, you're naive, you're mystics, you're just, oh dear Lord, ye children, if only ye could navigate the world properly and know things and use the scientific method, you wouldn't have to do all of that, and you could just understand that the porcupine doesn't throw its quills. Every now and then, people in tribe number 2 die because they get too close to the porcupine, the quill gets stuck in their skin, burrows in, causes an infection, and they end up dying. It's very unfortunate. And they've just rationalized this, like, yeah, it's just part of life. So the question is, which way of being in the world is more true? Not the story, not the language, not the words, but which way of operating, which way of moving these bodies is more true in that situation. So this is what is, like, physically false but literally true. So if that lands, we tell ourselves stories the whole time to motivate ourselves, to move ourselves, to understand the other people. They're not angry, they're just upset. Oh, tell me why you're upset. Changes the story, changes the conversation, opens up a door that wasn't even there before. We tell ourselves stories all the time. As I've said before, I think everything comes down to story. But let's not digress. So now we get into the postmodern sort of cacophony of stories and relativism and just, it's all just story, nothing's real, nihilism, loss of hope, all of that sort of stuff. If this doesn't speak to you, that's cool. But if this does kind of resonate, you'll understand this sort of space, that trying to find something true and the kind of anxiety that goes along with that. So there is, of course, this meta-modern twist then of like, yes, there are loads of stories, but there are hierarchies to stories. Now, what is a good story and what is a bad story is our kind of, it's our quest in this generation perhaps, or in this century, is to try to navigate that. All of this clearly reflects in religion, or in spirituality, or in these big collective stories that we kind of use to navigate our way of understanding the world, our worldview, our frames, our glasses, like whatever way you want to understand this. And I apologize for using the word religion. I mean it in the sense that it's a worldview. I don't mean it in the sense of the organization and the structure, and that even though, again, another video, I'm going to leave that for the moment. So my question for you here today is, again, can you believe in a story that is not factually or historically true? Yes. And why should you? Because it might put you into better connection with reality. It might, because this is an active project that we are all going to need to participate in, which is how do we find a story that lets us all get along, especially when we have the just mass migration of everyone everywhere. I am not living in the town I was raised in, and I don't want to prescribe that either. But I'm just saying, as in, like, we are unrooted. Everyone, some people more than others, but we are all unrooted to some extent. So we're going to need to try and find some story that helps us get along and not kill each other. But we're also going to need to maybe extend the story out further and include our food and nature so that we don't starve and die that way. And then we might need to extend it even further out into the ecologies, the whole systems that have to maintain for our food not to wither and die, and therefore us wither and die. So again, we need a story that nests these like a Russian doll, and holds them all properly. So that is the project. But for today, and that is why everyone's trying to be an influencer, that's the wave that's coming, that's the wave we're on. But for today, I want to ask you a question of, how do you put yourself under a culture? Because we're all very good at preaching, this is my culture, this is my worldview, you should believe what I believe, da 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 da. I get it. But if you are living in a town or a village, there is like a community spirit. Or if you're watching this, you're in the West, so you've a Western spirit because you're using technology, you're understanding English. None of us invented or created either of those, so we are standing on the shoulders of giants. We are like, there's a culture above us, holding us. Kind of, that's the imagery that's coming to mind. And not coming to mind on the fly, this is the imagery that has been kind of spoken about, but there's multiple ways of imagining it and understanding it, so I don't want you getting caught in just this one. Anyway, the main question is though, how do you subserve yourself to a culture that runs above you without crippling your spirit? Like, that's the fear. So let's do an imaginal game, like let's do a thought exercise here. And we'll say that your town is very proud of its music, and that you are an artist, a craftsman, you are a carpenter or a blacksmith making jewelry and chandeliers, or you're whatever, but you're a crafts person, you're an arts person, and you don't care about the music, and they're holding this big festival on, and woo, everyone, but just not for me. I'm doing my own thing. Okay, so that story is in almost every story. It is the mad scientist. It is the hero's journey. It is the craftsman. It is the person who obsesses over the one thing at the expense of the kind of community spirit or the connection with others, but that has value because they bring their skill, their craft, their whatever in its own setting, and there's like a harmony, there's an ecosystem, there's a way of this working out. Awesome. But most of us are not craftsmen. Most of us do not have like a high ability on any kind of given talent. We're all fairly mediocre most of the time. So with that, as bleak as that is, and if you want to resist it, put in your 10,000 hours, master something. Awesome. I am not going to deny you that adventure. But at some point, we'll need to come back into the community. At some point, we'll need to understand that there's some sort of culture above us. So how to subserve into that? And that's not an easy answer. I believe it comes from worrying about the next generation. I don't think we actually do it for ourselves. And in today's world where no one wants kids, but also no one's really worried about the next generation too much, it's too much hassle, or the systems are all broken, so no one's trying to pick up what the next generation are going to inherit, or everything's changing so much that we don't even know what world they're going to grow up in, so it's hard to even give them advice on what they should focus on, what they should not focus on, all of this stuff. But I think if we are to have some sort of community, if we are to have some sort of shared space where we get along and we sacrifice into some sort of collective for the good of everyone, this would be everyone giving a little bit of money so that you get a school, and geez, then that just pays dividends over the next couple of generations. And if you do that over many generations in many different ways, well, then now everyone's better off. This has been the Western project, but the Western project is slowing down. Progress is slowing down, or productivity is slowing down. Progress, you can argue that one, depends how you define it. But we are slowing down on that mission of trying to leave a better world, of trying to reach for the stars and trying to bring it down for the next generation. That is my belief on this one. So the question I do want to pose to you is, how do you accept some sort of overarching culture or some sort of overarching team spirit, whether that's a family team spirit, a community team spirit, a town spirit, your football team spirit, if you're like a certain style of playing, whatever that, any of these things, but just how, when it's really grating against you, how do you imagine in 20 years' time you're going to help someone when it's grating against them? That's the question to pose. That's me for this week. I hope you've had a great week. I hoek you're looking forward to the week to come, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.